When truth is buried, the silence is demanded. We stand at our freedom's edge.
And this is our Freedom's Edge. Welcome to our Freedom's Edge, episode 17, The Habit of Obedience. I'm Diane Bailey, and this is where conscience meets courage. There's something comforting about being told what to do. We don't like to admit that. We think of ourselves as independent thinkers, strong-willed, free people. Americans especially love that story about ourselves. We don't bow. We don't surrender. We don't blindly follow. We question authority. At least that's what we tell ourselves. But obedience rarely begins with someone demanding that we surrender everything we believe. It begins much smaller than that. One compromise, one uncomfortable silence, one moment when something doesn't feel quite right, but we decide not to make trouble. At one time when we tell ourselves, hey, it's not my responsibility. Someone else knows better. There's nothing I can do anyway. And then we tell ourselves that again and again, until something that once would have shocked us becomes familiar. And something that once would have made us say, absolutely not, barely makes us look up anymore. And that's what I want to talk about today. Not obedience as a single decision, but obedience as a habit. Because habits are powerful things, and sometimes entire societies develop them. There is nothing inherently wrong with obedience. Civilization could function without some degree of it. We stop at red lights. We follow safety rules. We listen when a doctor tells us how to take medication. And in the military, obedience can literally save lives. I understand that world. I wore the uniform. I understand discipline. I understand the chain of command. And I understand that functioning organizations require people to respect legitimate authority. But legitimate authority and unquestioning obedience are not the same thing. And that distinction matters because obedience becomes dangerous when we stop asking whether the thing we're being asked to do is right. And usually that doesn't happen all at once. It happens in degrees. The unacceptable becomes debatable, then tolerable, then normal, and eventually expected. That's how the line moves. Not 10 feet at once, an inch, and then another inch, and then another inch, until one day we look around and wonder, how the hell did we get all the way over here? And if you want to see normalization in real time, look at what we have allowed to become acceptable in the White House. Think about our grandparents. Whatever their politics, how many of them could have imagined that Americans would one day normalize a commander-in-chief who has been recorded boasting about grabbing women by the genitals, who was later found by a jury liable for sexually abusing a woman, and whose public record has repeatedly included degrading language about women and racial and ethnic groups. Yet, folks, here we are. Not because all of a sudden that became acceptable, but because inch by inch, enough people decided it was tolerable. They excused one thing, then another, until behavior that once might have disqualified a person from public life became something millions of Americans were simply expected to shrug off. That is how the fence moves. That is the line we keep moving. Think about how this happens in ordinary life. Your boss asks you to do something you know is questionable. Nothing dramatic, just as honest enough to, bother you a bit. Everybody else seems fine with it, so you do it. The next request crosses the line a little further, but you've already crossed it once. Or when you're sitting around the dinner table and someone makes a cruel remark about immigrants, gay people, transgender, Muslims, black people. You know the comment's wrong, but you don't want an argument. So you stay quiet. And it happens again, and you stay quiet again. Eventually, nobody expects you to object. Maybe even you stop expecting yourself to object. And that's the part we don't talk about enough. Every time we ignore our conscience, ignoring it becomes a little easier. Every time we remain silent because silence is more comfortable, silence becomes more familiar. Every time we surrender our judgment to somebody else, surrendering it becomes less frightening. And that's how habits work. We often imagine courage as something dramatic. Someone standing in front of a tank, a whistleblower exposing corruption, a soldier refusing an unlawful order. Those things take tremendous courage. But most of us are never going to stand in front of a tank. Our tests usually arrive much more quietly. They arrive when everybody else laughs at the joke we don't think's funny. When somebody is being mistreated and everyone else looks away, we're told, hey, just go along with it. Everybody does it. Don't make it difficult. Those little moments matter because they train us, not for some imaginary test of character in the future. Those moments are the test. Psychology has taught us something uncomfortable about human beings. Authority matters, group pressure matters, fear matters, and gradual escalation matters. Ordinary people can be persuaded to do things they once believed they would never do. That's why I, personally, become very uncomfortable whenever I hear someone confidently saying, I would never go along with that. I would never stay silent. I would never obey something immoral. I would never allow my country to become that kind of place. Maybe. I hope not. But history should make all of us more humble about those words. Because the people who failed those tests weren't monsters from another species. They were human beings. They had families, jobs, friends, fears, responsibilities, and many probably thought of themselves as good, decent people. They told themselves things human beings have told themselves throughout history. I'm just doing my job. I'm not making the policy. Hey, if I don't do it, someone else will. I can't afford to get involved. Hey, that's someone else's fight. Those sentences should frighten us precisely because they don't sound monstrous. They sound ordinary. Another sentence that history has heard too often: I was only following orders. And this is where being a veteran matters deeply to me. Military service teaches obedience. It has to. But it also teaches responsibility. When I raised my hand, my oath was not to a president. It was not to a political party. It wasn't to an individual commander. It was to the Constitution. And service members are required to follow lawful orders. Lawful orders. And that distinction exists for a reason. Personal responsibility doesn't disappear simply because someone above you gave an instruction. And I think that's a principle we need far beyond the military. Citizens don't surrender their conscience when someone gets elected. Government employees don't surrender their conscience because a supervisor issues an instruction. Police officers don't surrender their conscience because leadership establishes a policy. Doctors don't surrender theirs because politicians demand that medicine serve ideology. And voters certainly don't surrender their conscience because their political party tells them they must defend everything their side does. Authority does not erase responsibility. And yet, one of the easiest places to surrender that responsibility is politics. Partisan obedience may be one of the clearest examples of conscience being handed over to somebody else. Watch how easily it happens. Something occurs, and our immediate reaction is, that's wrong. Then we discover who did it. And suddenly, the questions begin. Well, maybe there's an explanation. Maybe it was necessary. Maybe it was misunderstood. Maybe the other side did something worse. And before long, instead of asking, is this right? We're asking, did my side do it? Instead of, is this constitutional? We ask, does this help us win? Instead of, would I tolerate this from the opposition? We ask, how can I defend it? That's when conscience gets outsourced to the tribe. And when that happens, we are no longer citizens holding leaders accountable. We become followers protecting leaders from accountability. There should be a behavior that shocks us, regardless of who does it. There should be principles we defend, regardless of which political party benefits. If something is wrong when they do it, it has to remain wrong when we do it. Otherwise, it isn't principle, it's obedience. And I want to be clear, this is not an argument against loyalty. Loyalty can be beautiful. Loyalty to family, friends, comrades, community, country. But loyalty without boundaries becomes dangerous. Real loyalty sometimes requires saying no. A good friend doesn't let you destroy yourself and call that friendship. A good parent doesn't give a child everything they demand and call that love. A good citizen doesn't excuse everything a leader does and call that patriotism. Sometimes the most patriotic word in the English language may simply be no. No, it isn't acceptable. No, that isn't constitutional. No, I will not participate. No, I will not remain silent simply because speaking is uncomfortable. No, my political party doesn't get to decide what my conscience believes. No, no, no. I don't have one dramatic personal story for you in this episode because the habit of obedience isn't usually one dramatic moment. It's thousands of ordinary ones. The meeting where nobody challenges the boss. The dinner table where everybody lets the comment pass. The church where questioning leadership becomes betrayal. The political party where people stop asking whether something is right and starts asking whether it helps their side. The moment when something bothers us, but keeping our mouth shut seems easier. Those moments don't make history books. Most of them aren't even remembered. But put enough of them together, and they can change a family, an institution, a community, even a country. So maybe the real question isn't whether I can remember a time when I obeyed when I should have questioned. Maybe the question is whether any of us can honestly say we haven't. The good news, folks, the good news is habits can be broken and courage can become a habit too. You don't wake up one morning magically fearless. You practice. You ask the uncomfortable question. You speak when staying silent would be easier. You defend someone who isn't in the room. You challenge misinformation, even when your friends are sharing it. You refuse to laugh at cruelty. You tell your political party, I support you when you're right, and I will oppose you when you're wrong. You vote, you show up, you write, you call, you protest peacefully. You stand beside people being targeted. You refuse to let fear make every decision for you. Most of those things don't look heroic. Most courage doesn't. But every one of them strengthens something inside us. Because the same way repeated obedience teaches us to surrender our judgment, repeated acts of conscience teach us to trust it. I think that's one of the great misunderstandings about tyranny. People imagine resistance begins after tyranny arrives. It doesn't. By then, the cost may already be enormous. Resistance begins earlier, while citizens still have institutions, while we still have elections, courts, a free press, the ability to assemble, the ability to speak, the ability to organize. Those aren't decorations around democracy. They are democracy's tools. And if we wait until every tool has been taken away before deciding to use them, then we have waited too damn long. That doesn't mean violence. It doesn't mean chaos. It doesn't mean revolution. It means citizenship, active citizenship, sometimes loud citizenship, sometimes uncomfortable citizenship, sometimes inconvenient citizenship, but citizenship. So here's a question I'd like you to ask yourself this week. Not about Washington, not about somebody else's behavior, but about yours. What have you gotten used to that once would have bothered you? Really think about it. What behavior have you normalized? What cruelty barely surprises you anymore? What political behavior would you have condemned immediately if the other party did it? When have you remained quiet because speaking would have been uncomfortable? I'm not asking those questions to shame you. I'm asking them of myself too, because awareness is how habits begin to change. And before we can resist obedience, we first have to recognize it. But recognizing it isn't enough. Eventually, conscience asks something more difficult. Are we willing to refuse? And that's where we'll go next time on our Freedom's Edge, the courage to refuse. You see, freedom rarely disappears in a single moment. Sometimes it disappears one obedient decision at a time, one silence at a time, one surrender at a time, and preserving it may begin the same way. One voice, one courageous decision, one refusal at a time. But we have to make those choices while we still can. While we still have a voice, use it. While we still have the right to stand, stand. While we still have the power to say no, say no. And while we still have the freedom to fight for our democracy with our voices, our votes, our presence, and our courage, fight for it. Because there may come a day when the freedoms we assumed would always be there are the very freedoms we wish we had defended when we still had a chance. So don't wait for someone else. Don't wait for the perfect moment. Don't wait until resistance requires more courage than you think you possess. Speak while you can. Stand while you can stand. Refuse while you can refuse. And defend your freedom while it is still yours to defend. One no at a time. I'm Diane Bailey. This is our Freedom's Edge. Stay awake, stay vigilant, stay loud, stay free, and stay on the edge with me.
When truth is buried, the silence is demanded. We stand at our freedom's edge.